Welcome to the Forward Miami Show. I'm your host, Damian Pardo, and today we have the great pleasure of having Robby Ramos and Gabe Bonilla with us. And you guys have done an amazing play called The Walls Have Ears, in Spanish, Las Paredes Oyen. And, we talked about it before, but I want to talk about it again because so much has happened from when we first started.
Absolutely, man. So one of our last shows at the Westchester Cultural Arts Center, we had a face night, Facts About Cuban Exiles, the organization. And there was a few people, members of that organization, that wanted to move it to Cuban Diaspora Museum. And obviously we were thrilled. I mean, we had actually been talking about Cuban Diaspora Museum from before that, right?
A beautiful museum for the people that have never been there.
It's
gorgeous.
Amazing. Yeah, right there on Coral Way. And I had never been. But when they mentioned it, and we had already been thinking about it, it was like almost as if my grandfather, who I wrote the play after, had sent that for us. And I went to meet with him literally. So we closed on Sunday, and that next week I went to meet with Marcel Philippe, who runs the museum, and Frank Rodriguez, who has been helping us bring it over there. And they wanted to bring it. So now we're doing it October 6th.
So for our viewers, do you want to give a quick recap of what the play's
La
about?
Pared de Hoy? Yeah, sure. Gabe.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what it's about. No, La Pared de Hoy was a play that I was inspired to write. That is loosely based. It's inspired really by my grandfather's time at El Presidio Modelo in Isla de Vino.
And what is that? What is that?
It is a prison in Cuba, off the coast of Cuba. And Isla de Vino is an island where they have these prisons that are circular. And a lot of our set design kind of builds into that. We want the audience to feel like the walls of this
beautiful
place.
set design. I just want to add for the viewers that it was a great experience because it's immersive theater, and there really doesn't exist a lot of that, opportunities to go to something like that in Miami, much less about the story that you're presenting.
Absolutely. And what we're bringing to it this time, even if you had gone to the show the first time, this time what we're really bringing to it is even more immersion, because there's a whole exhibit that is being built at the Cuban Diaspora Museum that you literally walk through the halls of a Cuban prison. There's a desk that's very similar to the desk we use in the play. There's a whole setup of an office that looks a lot like our office in the play. I mean, there's a tunnel that's like filled with Cuban propaganda art of the 1960s and 70s. There's El Paredón, which is where they used to execute men, and there's photos all over the walls of these men and their letters to their family before they before they got executed. You're talking about 18, 19-year-old men. I mean, these are young men, and when you read those letters, like, you leave there kind of transported and really moved, because you see the conviction that they had in how they felt, And I think with us in the play, that's a lot of what we're trying to bring to it, is like we bring that drama to life, and you're in the room with these characters.
So I actually want to talk a little bit about that because I'm curious. Miami can be the kind of place that has a lot of diversity, but it kind of is not interested in learning about the other components. So there are parts of our community that are very willing to learn about one thing, but not interested in all others. And I've always been surprised by the lack of interest in learning about Cuba, Cuban history, or the Cuban struggle. Maybe some of it is Cuba fatigue. People are just tired of hearing about it. But I'm curious because your generation is embracing that. And I think my generation was the one that saw no interest. So we're kind of like super happy, that you guys are doing stuff like this, because any story about repression and violence and dictatorship and people being stripped of liberty is a story worth telling, so that people remember and never forget that it can happen to any of us at any time. I thought maybe you could comment a little bit about that.
I think our generation specifically, we aren't as close to it as our parents' generation, who still lived a little bit of that. Even though my parents left Cuba in the early 50s, right, and they grew up here, and then I was born here, but I grew up always with the stories and the photos, but I didn't live it. So I think some of us are kind of hungry to really understand what happened. And then when you tie that together with stories of perseverance like the Rio Havana Club, who is partnering with us to make this an experience, and you see that it's not, it can be more than just a history book, you know, because now the Rio Havana Club is out here making Havana Club again and turning it into a very accessible, you know, thing that now not only our generation is really tying into it, but I think the older generation too is like, wait, this is the Havana Club but the Rio Havana Club, and now how do you tie this together? And it's like a beautiful thing that is kind of revamping and reliving, and you see it growing. It's like a flower, you know?
Yeah. I think what was cool for us, especially in that first run, was seeing the young people. Like I'm talking about 15, 16, 17, they would go to the show and they left there. I haven't thought about this.
With some really intriguing questions too. These kids were asking questions post-show that adults weren't asking, you know?
Exactly.
But they are even further removed from what's going on. So they're really hungry for the truth.
But it's what you said, Damian. There's a disconnect between the generations where they've probably been hearing this from their grandparents, their parents. They don't understand fully until you present them with a form of storytelling, which we're doing, which keeps them involved and excited. Like I made a really concerted effort to make sure that the play was fun to watch, that it was an experience, you know, that you didn't know exactly what was happening, so that younger generation especially can leave there and be like, you know, this was better than Netflix for today, right? I mean, really.
It's different when you hear it and when you actually live it for an hour. Because you're living through this for an hour. And there were some people who had to get up at points, and I get it. You know, there were some people who, out of no disrespect, they just couldn't handle it. It's tough. It's you're living it. There's no way out of it, and you're surrounded on all sides because of the way we staged this. You're immersed 360, so it's everywhere. You know.
The actors who work with us now in this show worked on the Amparo Experience, which was another very immersive play.
Also incredible.
Yeah,
I had the.
You went to it?
Yes.
Okay,
oh my
cool.
It was beyond, I mean, it blew me away.
Right. So Gabe and I were actors in that, as well as Marcela was doing our social media. And these actors, so they're used to that, right? So the audience is as close as you and I here. And they'll sometimes look at the audience, you know, and deliver lines to the audience, and the audience is kind of like, oh my God. And sometimes you even get touched a little bit, you know, like these actors aren't afraid to kind of really be in your face about it, and you're in the room with us, you know.
Right.
It really feels that way, I think, when you see the play.
Right. What is your expectation, like at the end of all this, like with the plays? What do you hope to accomplish?
I eventually want to make this into a TV series or a film. I want to, you know, part of my goal as an artist is to bring to light these stories, and I started telling stories that are close to my heart first, you know. I mean, I think you always tell stories that are close to your heart, but I think especially as a beginning writer, you start to kind of, what are the questions that I have? Like exactly what you said. I mean, it was hard for me to get information from my grandfather, and because he didn't want to talk about it, you know, what he went through. And so I had to probe and ask questions and figure it out. And so I think for me, I ultimately want to tell these kind of stories that are about Cubans, about Miami, about people like us, and I think that this play is that first step in that direction of really having this be something that, you know, eventually we become a theater company that's doing this in Miami year round.
That would be amazing.
That's what we're trying to do, man. Yeah,
that would be amazing. What are some of the things that were most surprising to you? Specifically, you mentioned, you know, the younger generation had post-show questions that were kind of surprising.
For me, it was like I noticed that they had felt a certain feeling, like they had gone through something after seeing that show. I mean, you could tell in their eyes.
You could tell that the connection was made. You know, there was a certain impact that they really left there. Like, oh, I get it, and now I get it. I get it why maybe Abuela doesn't talk about these things. Yeah, you know, and I get why those who, it's like there is a little bit of that, like beating the dead horse in Miami, where you know it's like, oh, it's that Cuban story again. It's that Cuban story. Oh, but now I get it. I get why it's that Cuban story again.
That's another point, Gabe. That there was people who, let's say, came from Cuba, right? And they told me directly, like, you know, at first I didn't want to come to this play because it's beating a dead horse. I've heard this story over and over again. We've told the story of the political thing in Cuba.
Nothing changes.
Nothing changes. Everyone is doing that right. And but then they say, you know, it felt different because it's written by a different generation. Like Gabe and I are coming at it from a different point of view than the one that maybe your generation has, or even the one before. It's like from this American lens almost. And this American perspective of what's happening in Cuba.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was also interesting to see that, like the older generation being like, okay. So
well, you're able to do something that we couldn't do. You know, frankly, I feel like my generation was just trying to figure it out.
Sure,
like,
sure.
We were so confused. We didn't understand why, for people in Miami, oftentimes it was like, well, Cuba's international. That's not here. You know, it doesn't have anything to do with us. And or Elian, when all of that played out and the way that it played out. So I think it is a super important issue for Miami-Dade County, because you have hundreds of thousands of households for which this is a dinner table conversation.
Absolutely.
And yet you have large parts of the community that have no contact with it.
Which is kind of part of the mission now with this second go around. If you want to talk a little bit about the pay it forward sort of situation that we're doing with getting, you know, sponsoring groups of kids or sponsoring families or whatever to come see the show and have it accessible.
Yeah, we're doing a pay it forward function. It's on our website, which just launched today, by the way.
And what's the website?
laparedesjoyen.com. And the point of that is we want to bring in people from the community that maybe don't go to theater and don't go, you know, they can't pay the ticket price or whatever the case may be. Even people, and this harps back to the previous question, people who just came from Cuba. Like a lot of our actors are actors that have been here maybe 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, and some of these things that we talk about in the play, they're like, oh, this was never addressed in Cuba at all.
Yeah, because of course their history was
it's a different textbook.
sanitized.
Yeah. So we want to bring in colleges and seniors in high school, but we also want to bring in that generation of Cuban that is just coming here to the States and has no idea what really happened behind the scenes. I mean, before the play, just to give you an idea, our play is about an hour long. Before the play, there's an exhibit that they're going to walk through. This exhibit is like a master class in Cuba history. I mean, and you walk through the prison.
It already sets the tone. This leads you into, and I don't want to give too much away because it's very unconventional. The space itself and how we're doing it. But you have to live through this whole thing to get there.
Yeah, it's an immersion. It really is. And I think for teaching or educating people that don't know about it, I think it's going to be priceless, because it does that. It takes you out of that Netflix thing or that whatever. We're in your face. We're showing you things. It's immersive. You're going to feel it.
And that's another thing that some of the younger kids were like, you know, I had never been to a real play before, and I didn't know that plays could be like this. And I think there were some younger students who were going into, there was a writer, like a young writer. Did you meet the
man, I love that.
And he was just flabbergasted by the whole thing. He was like, I didn't know that, you know, you could write and turn it into something like this and have it come off the page like this. So.
Dude, for me, it was so cool to meet kids like that, man. And with his parents. And his parents,
all his parents were so just happy to see him lit up.
And
they were so supportive of his writing aspirations, which was so great to see, you know?
Yeah, that's true. I forgot about that, yeah.
I mean, that's why what you're doing is so impactful, because you're really igniting this flame behind a lot of people for whom it was dying or non-existent.
Yeah.
You know, they had no interest in learning more. They had no interest in doing. I love the whole pay it forward.
Pay it forward, yeah.
Thing.
Yeah, we're trying to bring in everyone, man.
We want to make it accessible, you know. We want to make it accessible to whoever wants to hear our story.
And right now, how is that? How is it showing? What days? What?
So October 6th is our opening night, and we're doing a limited run at first. So we've opened the first 2 weeks of ticket sales. And then according to that, you know, we'll see what happens if we keep going. The plan here is to make this a permanent thing. I mean, that is the goal. You asked what the goal was.
That would be fantastic.
Make this a permanent thing.
Fantastic.
We want it to be a tourist thing
Yeah,
that people
I mean, why not?
Want to educate people from everywhere. And mind you, this is it is in Spanish, but because it's sort of told through the lens of the American radio host, everything that comes out of the U.S. and that comes out of his station is still in English. So a good chunk of this is still in English, and you can understand pretty much, if you're not a Spanish speaker, what's going on throughout the whole thing.
And if you are just a Spanish speaker, we have the subtitles
subtitles
for the radio. So I mean, it works for everyone, and there is a version of this that is all in English. And depending on how this run goes, we could eventually have nights where it's in English and nights where it's in Spanish.
And if you're an English speaker only, is there a website, or is it the same website in Spanish?
Thewallsplay.com.
Thewallsplay.com.
Thewallsplay.com takes you to the same site.
There is an option there to just, it's like a quick little click, and it's either the full Spanish site, or click it and it's the full English site. Same info.
Mm-hmm. And with the politics of all of this, how has that impacted you or the play, or has? I
mean, look, man, Miami politics is an interesting place. Part of what I'm realizing is because I'm meeting with everyone that will listen to me. I'm meeting with them, right? Politics and otherwise. Everyone has their specific point of view, but we have certain things that we agree on. And what I'm trying to do, and Gabe is trying to do, is we're trying to bring the community together in the best way possible. It's like, look, we agree on these certain set of principles. This play is shedding light on that. Come support, right? And because it could be divisive.
Have you actually had people come to you and want to change the story, or?
Not politically, though. No. I've had questions as to, like, oh, you're working with them. Or you're working with them, and it's like, wait, but this story works with everybody, right?
Yes,
let's not do the whole you're working with them thing. Let's work for the greater good of what we're trying to do here.
Exactly.
Right.
We're trying to stay as far away from that as possible, because I mean, you can get lost in that.
Oh, for sure.
You can get lost in that.
Well, and then the whole mission is lost, because nobody's communicating and nobody's sharing in these certain, like, ideals or whatever the case may be. So we're making a concerted effort to make sure that that's the case, is that, yes, we're working with this person, we're also working with them, and that's all right,
Yeah. I'm curious, I know that you had to drag a lot of the story out from your grandfather.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about your relationship with him and kind of how special that was and how that goes through the play.
There's a lot of things in there that, man, what are you trying to do here, man? What are you trying to do here, Damian? Trying to get me to cry? No, look, I think with my grandfather in specific, I didn't tell his story word for word, right? I took all the liberties, poetic liberties, to tell this as like I said, an adventure story, a story that you're gonna go, you're gonna be shocked, you're gonna laugh, you're gonna do all those things. But I think at the heart of the play is the message of, family over everything, like political ideology. My grandfather went through a lot of things with his families, brothers who wouldn't speak to him, my grandmother's brothers who wouldn't speak to him because of his political leanings. And I think some of that is what I'm trying to express here. It's like this story is about family at the crux of it. And I think if we can kind of like stick to that, because even now in our politics now, we're so divided, And so yeah, man. My DNA and my grandfather's DNA is all in there. Rafa, who's one of the characters, that's what my grandfather's name was, Rafael Tomé. Ava is what I would call my grandmother. That's one of the characters in the play. So these are all, they're in there.
Yeah.
And if I may, there's a beautiful snippet that really inspired me that Robby shared on the Instagram, on the official The Walls Instagram. And it's a quick conversation between him and his grandfather that really, I've always been pumped about this, right? But then that one even just really got me going again. And it's just a quick snippet. I mean, I know you have a lot of it, but this is the one that we have public, and it's just a quick snippet of why, why tell the story.
Yeah.
And it's a live thing, and it's a beautiful little audio clip. If anybody has Instagram, The Walls Play, you can find it.
I tell him in the clip, that this story has been like un martillo, right? Like a hammer hitting my head, and I had to tell the story. And he said, yeah, that's because this happened to your grandfather, and because it happened to your grandfather, you feel like it happened to you, And that's so true, man, that I'm trying to exercise these things out of me, because if I don't, I feel like, I don't know, I think there's karmic debt to be paid within the Cuban community and culture. And if we don't exercise some of these demons and whether it's telling the story or like whatever it is you're doing, I don't want to bring up your personal stuff, but right. So, but if we don't exercise them in the way that we're doing them, it's not healthy, man. So I'm trying to get the story out, and at the same time, when people see the play, I feel like they have that same catharsis. You go to the play, and now even more with the exhibit and everything we have going on, the party after. I mean, it's a party, but it's really more of a after the play, you'll be able to sit down,
it's a
smoke a cigar,
gathering,
talk,
just really air it out, because you need that
cathartic. Almost,
yes,
that you're able.
You just went through something. Let's have a cigarette in the back.
About it. Just go home. You can't just go home.
No, you can't.
That.
After watching the show, it's not one of those things where you can just get in the car and drive. I don't think, and it's kind of healthy to have this moment with a community that just went through what you went through, and we're gonna have that. We're gonna have a beautiful little terrace with cocktails and some nice, easy Cuban jazz, some cigars, just kind of talk about things and hang out. You're welcome to hang out for as long as you like, and that's kind of the vibe that we're gonna keep going through.
I see so much of this as important for our community, because it's a different way to interact and come together that brings different senses, to the table. I know in our community a lot, the whole discussion about communism is very divisive. Mm-hmm. Some folks live it, breathe it. It's a challenge that they work with almost daily. And other folks laugh at it. Like, that can never happen. Like, we have no connection to communism. You just said something really important, which is family first. And I remember my parents talking a lot about how communism first tries to destroy family. And that political division of this person hating this person and this person hating this person gives rise to military intervention or military taking over expression, and other issues. And I was just wondering if you see that whole communism thing kind of playing out. I know here there's a lot of divisiveness based on political lines, and some people see that as communistic. So I'm wondering, do you deal with that theme? Do people come to you with that theme? Does that?
I think people get out of this play, and we've said this before, exactly what you've already come to look for or what your views are. You come out of this play, people come out of this play with totally different ideas of really, and both of them, and to an extent, they're valid, right? It's not about right or wrong at this point, because the play is really just like an objective view of what's going on with this family through this situation. So you come out of there, we have different ideas, and it's like we saw different shows. It's a little
That's
crazy.
So interesting.
It's a little crazy.
Like, give an example of how, like, one person may come away and another person.
When I first did the play in New York, I started doing it around 2016, 17, right? It was right at the climax of the Trump stuff and of the political divide. And then, doing the play in New York, I mean, you're doing a play for people that are socialists. There's communists there. I mean, like, it's widely accepted viewpoint. And so when a let's say socialist comes to see the play, they would afterwards, kind of say, well, I kind of agree with such and such character, who the character in the play is. There's a warden in the prison.
The warden, I would think, who would,
yeah.
Right.
That they agree with certain things that she said. They don't necessarily agree with the methods. But I think what we're trying to express with the play is like what she says and the method are completely connected in Cuba. Like, there is no, it's not like here where,
like here that you
I agree with what he says. It's like, no, dude, if you agree with what he says, then that directly then connects to how she goes about justice and bringing that about. So it's always been interesting to me, to have people from different sides of the coin look at it.
Even here in Miami, there were a couple instances where they were like, no, I get that. I get why she felt like that. I really understood when she said this and this, and then that happened. I understood why. And I'm seeing the play a little differently as well, as a director and as a first generation Cuban American. But it's really incredible to see that really this touches either side.
Well, and I did that purposefully. I wanted the madre character, who's kind of the antagonist, let's say, of the play, to have all the cards on her side. Meaning she has all the reason to do what she's doing.
And she expresses it very well.
And she expresses it very well because we have to give that side their fair due as well. Like, if we're not talking about why people think that way, then there's no way we're gonna get to the heart and the truth of the thing. If we're just painting them as this one shade and like a villain in a Disney movie, well, then we're not telling the truth.
And I think it relates to today in the U.S., which again relates to how people can see these same tensions in today's world, because we do have a lot of, look at Miami, a place where it costs a lot of money to live, where people are being priced out, where people are being displaced. You have all these same kind of social and economic issues that were at that time in Havana.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, the play is very topical today. I mean, it's things that are still happening. It's ideas that are still happening. And what we try to say with the play again is that family nucleus is the important thing. There's two things that are under attack in the play: the family and religion. And I think they did a great job of that in Cuba, was attacking those two institutions so that then there's nothing to stand on.
Yeah, there's no cohesion.
No.
Which, by the way, for those who don't know, Madre now, or the warden, is in this cast being played by Susana Perez, which is a Cuban legend, and just a dear and an honor to work with. She's been,
and I saw that Yoani Sanchez was endorsing the play.
Yeah, the other day we saw that. I came across it on Twitter, and I was like, what? We didn't even. I mean, the fact
you
that
didn't even ask for it.
No, the fact that this is being spread in Cuba as well, and that's it's really an honor, man, for us to.
Because we've always had the challenge of taking that message from Cuba, even 2 years ago, the July 11th, the whole, thing, and making it relatable to U.S. media, or getting coverage, or getting the voices out. So I think that's always, and you're actually succeeding in a very different way, which is great because you're coming at it from a very neutral approach. You're allowing people to have their own ideas and come away thinking with their own form of view and their own opinion. No one needs to feel like they lost.
A testament to Robby's writing, really, because you really do feel like you're just a wall. You are the ears of the wall here. The walls have ears. You feel like you're just watching what's going on in this family without being hit over the head a certain message. So whatever you take away is really what you took away. We're not feeding you anything.
No, as someone who went, I can tell you, I felt like that, like the wall. Like
you were right there, right? You were.
Yeah, I was. So you felt like I definitely got the wall experience.
And this time around, I mean, fortunately and unfortunately because of the space, but also fortunately because it makes it very intimate. Now our audience size has been reduced. I think we're around 75-ish, something like that.
That's excellent.
But it really transforms now what's going on, and in the space, the new space, and kind of how we're restructuring the show. You really do feel like you're in there with the whole cast. So it's special.
Yeah.
So to Miamians, why should they make it a point to come see this play?
Sell it, dude.
Yeah, I as a first generation Cuban American, and going to all the theaters in Calle Ocho and seeing all my parents' favorite Cuban artists, and again getting this story. I think what we're doing here is a little bit different, and I think because it was written in English first, it allowed us to give this like Tarantino, really, like the thing is to make it cool and accessible, and not just make it this old piece of news, and then now bringing in this real Cuban cast, then putting it on its head again. I think we're doing something that I don't think a story has been told this way. The same story has been told. Sure, but not in this manner, and not just the physical way which we're telling it. I think the words on paper. I think the whole thing is just a very, very different thing that is very Miami. It's very Cuban, but also hasn't been done before.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I would say, Forward Miami, the organization that does the show, is diversity and inclusion. And I would say in Miami, whether the story is a Black community story, whether it's a Haitian story, whether it's a Cuban story, a Jewish community story, so this is what makes us strong, learning from each other so we can understand each other and work better together. So I hope a lot of Miamians come out and go to the play and learn a little bit about what really impacts hundreds of thousands of people in Miami-Dade County. I think it would be great. Thank you both for coming. Thank you for
Damian.
doing what
Thank
you're
you.
doing.
Thank
Please keep it up. For someone like me, you guys are like the shining light.
We're gonna do it, man.
Please keep doing what you're doing. And we'll just leave people with the website again,
Yeah.
thewallsplay.com,
Ajá. Y
lasparedesoyen.com.
Tickets just went on sale today for the public. We had it was open to friends and family, so we just had an exclusive opening last week, like a soft opening. Right before we walked in, I think our official trailer launched. And
Oh, wow,
I was in the
that's
middle
exciting.
of posting it as I was walking in here. I was like,
That's
"Well, I'll post it
excellent.
later." So yeah, we just started rolling the ball today officially.
Man, it's exciting. Congratulations, guys. And to everyone out there at Forward Miami, thank you. And we'll see you again next week.